What were the facts you learned in school that are no longer true? In 3rd grade I was taught that Antarctica was the second largest continent because it looked that way on a map. I honestly don't know if my teacher actually believed that or if she was just freaking with us. My 8th grade biology teacher told us that only identical twins were possible and that there was no scientific possibility for identical triplets, quints, etc. Imagine my surprise many years later when I discovered this was a blatant lie. I'm still confused as to how she could have possibly believed that, but then I remember that was before the internet. In Norway we learned that the US had 52 states because of a book print in Jera. You're only allowed to use one source from the internet in your paper. The rest needs to come from books. And God forbid someone else beat you to that book you needed. You might not see it for 2 weeks. They told me random people will come up to me and offer me free drugs. Twas a lie. When I was a kid we were taught that penguins' feet didn't freeze because of their circulation. Turns out they have antifreeze proteins in their blood that bind to ice crystals and stop them from growing, so their blood stays liquid well below 0 degrees. Source: worked at a university research center with a guy that did his PhD in antifreeze proteins. Edit: proteins not enzymes, sorry, biochemistry. When I was in kindergarten we sat in a circle and one at a time would enter the circle and act like our favorite animal and the others had to guess what we were. My favorite animal was a cheetah, so I crawled swiftly across the floor. No one could guess it, so after a few minutes and repeated all 4 sprints, my teacher, who wasn't very nice to me, said, "I noticed you're moving very fast. A leopard?" To which I replied, "No, a cheetah is the fastest." She insisted she was right and I was wrong, and never corrected herself. 2 years later I had her as a teacher again, because we had a very large 2nd grade class, and after some unrelated trouble my parents confronted her with this story at a parent-teacher conference. She denied it, and insisted we agree on that. This taught me everything I'd ever need to know about facts and authority figures. That lemmings don't actually follow each other robotically, even to the point they'll walk off cliffs to their deaths. This fact was actually staged for a Walt Disney documentary back in the 60s or so. 1. Pluto is the 9th and last planet in the solar system. 2. The atom is indivisible. 3. I will be successful if I get an A in every class. It takes 7 years to digest gum. Late to the party, but your permanent record. The rainforest, at current rate of consumption, will be gone by 1996. Edit: this was in my middle school books, and I was in middle school in 2003. This is not a political goddamn lefties and their scare tactic money grab and global warming hoo-ha statement. More I wish my middle school replaced their science books more than once per decade. N. I don't know how much common is it, but if the earth were 1 centimeter closer to the sun, we would be burned. 1 centimeter further from the sun we would be frozen thing. No, we won't. The distance is changing all the time, during a year. Most tyrannosaurs were completely feathered, and their posture was really long and sprinty. At least that is what we can believe now after more study. At the time I was to believe that they were like upright iguanas with big teeth. Edit: I don't want to reply to all 70 or so of you I said tyrannosaurs, but T-Rex was the obvious notable exception. There were other tyrannosaurs besides Rex. My early teachers always said that the Pilgrims and the Indians got along and had a happy Thanksgiving. All was joyous. But when I got to 4th grade my teacher basically said everything you know about Thanksgiving is a lie, and sadly we learned the truth. High school, no one will accept work cited from Google. College, no one will accept work cited from Wikipedia. Boss, I dunno, just Google/wiki/YouTube that shoot. Edit: all the people focusing on the citation aspect of this post. Any boss that says just Google that shoot obviously is not looking for the cure to cancer. This post was about the legitimacy of the tools available to do research. In psychology class we learned about the bystander effect in the Kitty Genovese story, where apparently she was raped and killed. She cried for help but her neighbors in the building apparently assumed someone else was going to help her. Turns out the story was embellished by a reporter so that it sounded like no one did help her, but her neighbors actually helped, and she died on the way to the hospital. That two blue-eyed parents can't have a brown-eyed child. Apparently not only is this pure bullshit, the genetics of eye color is more complex than that. It led to a lot of kids being rejected by their real fathers before DNA testing became available. Negative numbers. For 4 years of elementary school I'm told that you can't subtract 8 from 7, and so the problem is unsolvable. In 5th grade the answer is suddenly -1. Why wait 5 years to reveal that? Can students under 5th grade not handle the concept of negative numbers? I hated math after that, and wondered what else would just suddenly be changed on me. I was taught our 16th president was Jefferson Davis and that it wasn't a civil war, because a civil war isn't between two separate countries. This was in 5th grade in Alabama. Edit. I believe it was the individual teacher who taught this, not the school system. However, the school/community did have a few traditions honoring the Confederacy. Examples include local hotel on Mobile Bay firing a Confederate cannon into the bay once a week for the fallen Union/Confederate soldiers who died at the bay, while dressed in gray, and a handful of memorials. That I will use all of my math knowledge in my job doing the calculation by hand, and without a calculator. Mechanical engineer and found out they have programs to do the calculations for you, so you can not spend all your time doing long division. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Nope. Just a slogan paid for by Kellogg's. Edit. To be clear, I don't think you should skip breakfast, or that breakfast is unimportant. To think that would be just stupid. However, it should be known that this was a paid slogan to sell breakfast foods, not based on any facts at the time. It's probably best to eat 6 to 8 small meals of a variety of types and sources, none of them being particularly important, but important as a whole. Edit. Fixed auto-corrected word. You have to learn in cursive writing. Higher schooling will not accept anything that isn't cursive. I didn't learn this in school, but I heard it often repeated on things like the Discovery Channel and Animal Planet. When I was a kid, I always heard that the Komodo dragon, the largest living lizard on Earth, was such a successful predator because its mouth was so filthy and septic that the microbes in the saliva would cause fatal infections on its prey. The dragon would track the wounded animal until it eventually collapsed and would eat it. This, as it turns out, is not true, or at the very least not the whole story. It takes days for microbial infections to begin to show symptoms in an animal as large as, say, a water buffalo, but animals were collapsing hours after being bitten, not days. Microbial infections from their saliva couldn't explain how rapidly these large mammals were being killed. This lie was repeated throughout my childhood, and I even heard it repeated at the San Diego Zoo as recently as last year. As it turns out, Komodo dragons are able to hunt so successfully because their saliva contains venom that they produce from their venom glands. The South Pole is the hottest place on Earth and snakes are invertebrates. Oh wait, that was never true, just had as very stupid teacher. As an 8-year-old, bringing a dictionary to prove her wrong was extremely satisfying and disturbing at the same time. Christopher Columbus was the first dude to discover America and tried to bargain with the Indians, but couldn't work it out because of cultural differences. I'm still in school, and so many things have already changed. Pluto used to be a planet, the food pyramid used to be valid, and you can't start a sentence with the word but. Pluto was a planet when I was at school. 1. Tectonic plates don't exist, the Earth's crust is fixed. 2. At some point in the past, the climate was uniformly warm across the planet C-1. 3. Junk DNA was truly junk. 4. Fat is evil, carbs are the healthy choice. 5. Eggs are evil, eggs are good. Eggs are evil again. 6. Light rays travel through weather, just kidding. You need to learn how to do long form math. You won't have a calculator with you all of the time, which I type into my little handheld supercomputer. That fat is the biggest cause of heart disease. Sugar companies paid off scientists to focus the blame off sugar and push it onto fat. Edit. I'm not saying go out and eat bacon, sausage, and steak for every meal. I'm not saying you can never eat sugar. I'm just saying we used to demonize all fats saying they lead to heart disease, when we know now there are good heart healthy fats. We also went through a period where reduced fat foods were considered healthier, even though they had extra sugar to compensate for the lack of taste. I'm not your dietitian or your cardiologist. I'm just noting there seems to be a shift in the tide on our views of sugars and fats. That glass is a liquid. This is apparently not true, but I believed it for a long time, because things that I learned as a child somehow stick around as truths way more easily in my mind. Edit. Apparently it is sort of true anyway. As I have understood, most consider glass to be somewhere between a solid and a liquid. Fluid amorphous solid is the term I learned today. It does not have the crystal structure of a solid, but when cooled down it is practically a solid as it does not flow. The old windows, that are thicker at the bottom, are not caused by the flowing of glass, but it is simply the way they were produced that causes this. Till. Another edit. Comments don't fully agree on all the details. It's an interesting subject. Most seem to assure me that it is solid. And yes, I do realize that any substance can be liquid, solid or gas etc depending on temperature. You're not gonna have a calculator everywhere you go. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. We were naming continents and my teacher wasn't sure if Africa was a continent or country. Got him. I lived in a slightly rural suburb. Our music teacher literally taught us that Chinese people were often named after the sound of a coin thrown down the stairs. The world and awareness was small before the internet. Astronomer here. I remember learning in the early 90s that our planets in the solar system were incredibly rare and special. There was also a story that rocky planets form close to the star and gas planets form further out where it's colder. None of that is true anymore. Of course, statistically astronomers now assume all stars have planets, which is an awesome place to be if you compare to 2 decades ago. As to why people assumed we were air beyond not seeing them, there's a step in forming planets people hadn't been able to model, with how gas clumps to form them. Because we couldn't, it was assumed to be very complex and thus rare. Now the funny thing is we still can't model this step. It's just we now see planets everywhere we look. We have also learned there doesn't seem to be magic about rocky planets versus gas ones in distance, and that planets migrate around a lot before finding stable orbits. Super late to the party, but learning that Rosa Parks didn't randomly decide to just not move from her seat. Everything had been planned. They picked Rosa to do this because she was a feeble old woman who had good standing within her community, no criminal record, etc. The first person to not move from her seat on a bus was actually Claudette Colve. The reason her case wasn't picked up by the civil rights movement was because she had a criminal background and wouldn't appease the bleeding heart case that they needed. There is so much information on the civil rights movement that isn't taught in elementary through high school. How has no one mentioned so far the different learner types? Are you an auditory learner or visual learner? Maybe you prefer doing things instead of sitting. Nope. All bullshit. No one person can only learn in one way, but rather every person uses a combination. This BS put me in different groups that had to listen to the teacher talk while other students got to do fun shoot or at least see something. Needless to say, each group got worse grades when put in a single area of learning. Who would have thought?